Welcome to Relationship Psychology, your go-to space for raw, unfiltered insights into emotional healing, reclaiming personal power, and mastering the intricate psychology of relationships, heartbreak, and unbreakable inner strength. So many of us have been there. You're convinced that blocking him is the ultimate closure. You tell yourself that one simple tap on that button is you finally taking your power back, standing tall, and protecting your peace. In that heated moment, it genuinely feels empowering. It feels like you've delivered the final blow, drawn an unbreakable line in the sand, and declared to the universe that you're done being hurt. Your heart races with a mix of relief and triumph as you hit block, imagining him on the other side realizing he's lost access forever. But let's pause and get deeply, uncomfortably honest with ourselves here. Is this truly reclaiming power, or is it just deep pain cleverly disguised as strength? Blocking someone is, more often than not, a knee-jerk reaction, a built-in defense mechanism designed to shield us from immediate overwhelm. It's an instant way to hush the relentless noise in your mind, to quiet the emotional storm raging inside, to stop those painful reminders from popping up unexpectedly on your screen. You scroll less anxiously, your phone feels safer, and for a brief window, the world seems a little less chaotic. But here's the critical distinction we often overlook. Reacting in the heat of the moment is not the same as truly resolving the underlying turmoil. One approach sidesteps and avoids the raw feelings altogether. The other courageously dives in, acknowledges them, and works toward genuine understanding and release. The hard truth is that when most of us reach for the block button, we haven't fully processed or dealt with the emotional layers bubbling beneath the surface. We've constructed a digital wall, a barrier that allows us to pretend the pain isn't still there, lurking and waiting. We've hidden the trigger, but we haven't healed the wound it exposed. Let me pose a question that might shift your perspective. What fundamentally changes in your life the instant you block him? On the surface, yes. You gain a momentary surge of control, a quick hit of perceived strength that makes you feel like you're in charge again. Perhaps you sleep a bit more peacefully that first night, free from the dread of seeing his name light up your notifications. But give it a few days, a week, maybe even just hours, and watch what happens. The unanswered questions start creeping back in like shadows at dusk. Old memories resurface without warning. A song, a place, a random thought triggers a flood. The story you thought you'd ended refuses to stay buried just because you silenced the pings and alerts. Those intense emotions, the anger, the sadness, the confusion, the longing, they haven't evaporated into thin air. You've simply turned down the external volume, but the internal playlist continues looping endlessly in your head, sometimes even louder in the sudden quiet. Please don't misunderstand me. This isn't me advocating that you keep truly toxic, abusive, cruel, or manipulative people actively in your life or on your feed. Absolutely not. If someone has consistently shown themselves to be harmful, disrespectful, emotionally destructive, or outright dangerous, then removing their access is not just wise, it's essential for your well-being and safety. Protect your space fiercely when needed. However, the motivation driving that decision is just as important as the decision itself. Are you acting from your highest, most empowered self? From a place of grounded clarity, self-respect, and intentional choice? Or are you reacting from a storm of raw hurt, explosive anger, desperate heartbreak, or chaotic overwhelm? When you block impulsively in those vulnerable states, you're inadvertently granting him one last powerful emotional victory. You're subtly announcing to the world, and more importantly to yourself, you affected me so profoundly that I couldn't even tolerate the mere possibility of your presence in my digital world. That doesn't radiate true strength. It signals that he's still holding significant real estate in your emotional landscape, still influencing your peace from afar. It's a quiet admission that the attachment runs deeper than you'd like to admit. We've been conditioned by social media culture and popular advice to see blocking as the pinnacle of self-protection and empowerment. It looks clean, decisive, and final, like dramatically slamming a door and locking it forever, then pretending the entire room behind it has ceased to exist. But authentic healing doesn't follow such simplistic rules. It doesn't allow shortcuts that bypass the messy work. Blocking doesn't magically dissolve or sever deep emotional attachments. It simply places them on silent mode, buried but still very much alive. And you cannot fully heal what you're unwilling, or too afraid, to fully feel and examine. What real, lasting power looks like is something far more courageous. choosing to sit with your feelings without judgment, allowing the discomfort to wash over you, getting intensely curious about where the pain originates, why it grips so tightly, and what it's truly trying to reveal. It's looking the hurt square in the eye and saying, yes, this aches deeply right now, and I'm committed to facing it head-on rather than running away or numbing it temporarily. That's the essence of emotional mastery, the kind that builds unbreakable resilience over time. In contrast, blocking frequently serves as an attempt to fast-forward through the essential inner work, to skip the chapters that feel too heavy. It's comparable to hastily covering a profound, gaping wound with a flimsy bandage and naively hoping it will mend itself without proper cleaning, care, or attention. But wounds that are ignored or superficially treated don't just vanish, they quietly fester, infect surrounding areas, and resurface later in unexpected ways, often more painful than before. You deserve far better than lugging around lingering emotional residue, hidden scars, and unresolved baggage simply because you opted for the quickest escape route instead of the path toward true freedom. So the next time that overwhelming urge to block surges through you, when someone has triggered deep insecurity, reignited old fears, or left you feeling raw and exposed, practice pausing before acting. Inhale slowly and deeply. Create a small pocket of space between the trigger and your response. Then gently turn your focus inward and ask yourself probing questions. What's truly arising for me in this moment? What specific emotions am I experiencing? Where in my body do I feel them most intensely? What deeper fear or belief might this be touching? You may uncover profound revelations, that the sharpest pain isn't directly about his actions or words, but about what they symbolically represent in your life. Long-standing patterns of rejection, fears of abandonment, feelings of being unseen or undervalued, or the nagging inner voice whispering that you're somehow not enough just as you are. These realizations are invaluable treasures, pure gold in the journey toward self-awareness. They shift you out of reactive mode and into conscious, intentional healing. Because once you see the root clearly, you're no longer blindly lashing out or hiding. That's the moment true power is reclaimed, not through erasing someone to temporarily escape discomfort, but through courageously facing the discomfort, processing it fully, and emerging transformed on the other side. That's the profound shift where you evolve into someone truly unshakable from within, where your silence or distance isn't a defensive tactic or punishment, but a natural extension of your sovereign, radiant self-worth. It's a declaration that says, I am whole, regardless of who stays or goes. Modern culture constantly sells us this polished myth, that blocking someone instantly restores your peace, that digitally removing them from your world is irrefutable proof you've healed, grown, and moved on triumphantly. Scroll through advice threads, memes, or empowerment quotes, and you'll see it everywhere. Blocking portrayed as the ultimate boss move. But here's the deeper, less popular truth that changes everything. Genuine, sustainable peace never originates from erasing someone's online presence or silencing their potential reach. It blooms from the patient, deliberate work of reclaiming and fortifying your inner energy, the offline sanctuary that no external person or circumstance can truly penetrate. Blocking might provide an illusion of immediate control and relief, but far too often, it's merely avoidance masquerading as serene silence. There's a vast, transformative difference between authentic detachment and simple escape. True detachment feels like profound freedom. Your choices, words, or absence no longer dictate my emotional weather. I'm steady either way. Avoidance, on the other hand, whispers, I still feel too unsettled, too triggered by the mere idea of you, so you must completely disappear from my awareness. One is deeply rooted in unshakable inner strength and self-trust. The other stems from survival mode, fear, and unresolved vulnerability. You don't truly rise higher by digitally deleting someone from your orbit. You ascend when their presence, posts, stories, or even name no longer elicits any significant reaction from you. When you block in an attempt to force closure, the door might appear firmly shut, but check inside. If your thoughts still spiral around him regularly, if your heart still clenches at indirect mentions, if you're subtly monitoring whether he noticed your disappearance or felt the impact, then real detachment hasn't taken root yet. Your most potent power doesn't lie in cutting external ties dramatically. It resides in gently releasing the invisible internal cords, the emotional tethers that keep you subtly bound and reactive. Picture this liberated state vividly, effortlessly scrolling past his updates without a second thought, hearing casual mentions from mutual friends and feeling only neutral calm, even unexpectedly crossing paths in real life and remaining completely centered and unaffected. Your peace has evolved into something unconditional, independent of who enters, exits, or lingers in your periphery. That's the hallmark of advanced emotional maturity, detachment in its purest, most empowering form. We often confuse performative silence with genuine strength, but silence can be internally deafening if the mind continues racing, replaying scenarios, or craving validation behind the scenes. Authentic stillness isn't achieved by frantically pressing buttons to create distance. It's cultivated gradually until you reach a sacred inner space where no external button needs pressing because nothing outwardly activates or destabilizes you anymore. You're no longer emotionally available for old tug-of-war games. A common trap is believing that granting someone continued access automatically hands them power over your well-being. But that only holds true if your internal boundaries remain fragile or undefined. Flimsy inner foundations make external blocks feel temporarily necessary for safety. However, once you've invested in solidifying those inner walls, through reflection, therapy, journaling, spiritual practice, or whatever resonates, you discover something revolutionary. You no longer require erasures or dramatic cutoffs to safeguard your peace. You embody peace itself, radiating it outward naturally. When you operate from that elevated energy, every interaction and dynamic in your life begins to transform subtly but profoundly. You stop expending energy managing or controlling others' behaviors and instead master your own responses with grace. Impulsive reactions evolve into thoughtful, intentional choices. Fear of abandonment or rejection fades because your sense of worth has become intrinsic and unwavering, constant regardless of external validation or loss. The most life-altering transformation isn't about shifting from connected to completely cut off. It's the deeper journey from entangled attachment to serene, empowered neutrality. Emotional neutrality isn't cold detachment or emotional numbness. It's vibrantly alive, deeply grounded freedom, the rare ability to feel emotions fully when they arise while retaining full agency over how you respond and show up in the world. So when that familiar temptation surges to block someone purely for quick emotional relief or retaliation, challenge yourself to go deeper. What would feel even more empowering in the long run? What if the ultimate power move wasn't forcing him to vanish from your digital reality, but allowing his existence to continue while you remain completely, beautifully unmoved and centered? That's the profound evolution. That's the energy that attracts higher connections and repels anything less. That's where true, lasting power resides. Not in absence, but in unbreakable presence within yourself. One topic we don't discuss nearly enough in conversations about heartbreak, disappointment, rejection, or emotional triggers is the hidden opportunity embedded within every painful experience. The deeper lessons, profound revelations, and massive personal growth quietly waiting beneath the surface chaos if we're willing to look. When someone wounds you deeply, through ghosting, betrayal, indifference, mixed signals, or simply not choosing you the way you hoped, there's always a sacred message or mirror being held up, inviting you to see something important about yourself. But most people never access that gift because they instinctively block it out, both literally on their devices and emotionally within their hearts. Blocking feels like decisively closing a painful chapter, gaining the upper hand, and moving forward. But in reality, it's often more like abruptly slamming a transformative book shut right before reaching the most enlightening, life-changing sections. When you block prematurely, rushing to ghost, erase, vanish, or create irreversible distance, you might temporarily feel like you're ending the suffering and protecting your heart. But simultaneously, you're walking away from the exact teachings that situation arrived to deliver. And I promise you with absolute certainty, the lesson is always there, patiently waiting, no matter how messy or painful the delivery feels in the moment. Reflect on the last time someone made you feel discarded, ignored, undervalued, or profoundly let down. That intense urge to block surges powerfully in those raw spaces. You crave protection, perhaps a sense of justice or punishment, or simply an end to the relentless ache. I completely understand that impulse. It's deeply human. But imagine choosing a different path. Instead of immediately shutting him out or numbing the pain, what if you leaned in with gentle curiosity? What if you paused and asked illuminating questions like, Why is this hitting me with such intensity? What specific old belief or fear is being activated right now? Why does this particular rejection or distance feel so eerily familiar, so viscerally raw and deep? Behind virtually every intense emotional reaction lies a long-carried personal narrative, a core story you've been holding, often unconsciously, for years or even decades. It might be the belief that I'm fundamentally not enough as I am, or people I love always eventually leave, or love requires perfection to be sustained, or I must constantly prove my worth to be chosen. That person didn't originate or create that painful story. They simply, perhaps unknowingly, poked an existing tender spot, illuminating a wound that was already there, waiting for attention and healing. Here's where the magic truly begins. If you block without first exploring and understanding that deeper layer, you're not only blocking him, you're inadvertently blocking your own pathway to profound transformation and liberation. You're denying yourself access to becoming wiser, more resilient, deeply self-aware, and ultimately freer. You're missing those pivotal mirror moments where you can look inward with compassion and realize, this reaction isn't entirely about his behavior. It's echoing unresolved parts of my own history and beliefs about myself that I've carried far too long. That kind of breakthrough insight is absolutely priceless. It's the alchemy that transmutes raw heartbreak into lasting healing and elevation. It's what empowers you to break free from repetitive relationship cycles, outdated patterns, and familiar emotional traps that have kept you stuck or settling. We all say we desire real change. We crave growth, evolution, healthier dynamics, and love that finally feels secure and different. But how can we ever attract or sustain something truly new and better if we don't commit to showing up differently ourselves? If we keep avoiding the discomfort, rushing past the reflections, and refusing to ask harder questions when the same familiar pain resurfaces, we remain trapped in loops. Blocking might offer momentary relief that mimics strength, but genuine strength requires the courage to sit patiently with discomfort, listen intently to its messages, and extract the wisdom hidden within. It's undeniably easier to walk away quickly, delete, distract, or numb. It's infinitely harder to remain present with the lesson, to feel the full weight without immediate escape. But that's precisely where your next-level self resides, in that courageous space between impulsive reaction and thoughtful reflection. So no, I'm not suggesting you tolerate or maintain contact with genuinely toxic individuals who cause ongoing harm. I'm encouraging you not to rush into erasing someone simply because they triggered deep vulnerability. Instead, treat that trigger as a valuable flashlight, illuminating shadowy corners within yourself that still crave attention, tenderness, compassion, and healing. That's the true gift disguised as pain. Once you've received and integrated that gift, once you've done the reflective work, then absolutely set whatever boundary feels most aligned, including blocking if that's what serves you. But choose it consciously from a place of empowered wisdom and clarity, not from reactive woundedness or fear. Because blocking from pain might grant temporary quiet and surface-level peace, but unlocking and embodying the lesson delivers something far greater, authentic, unshakable power that radiates from your core and transforms every area of your life. One of the most challenging yet profoundly rewarding practices when you're navigating hurt, rejection, abandonment fears, or emotional upheaval is cultivating genuine curiosity, staying open and inquisitive rather than immediately judgmental, defensive, or shut down. But this simple shift in approach has the potential to change absolutely everything about how you experience and recover from relational pain. Most of us default to emotional reaction mode. It's wired into our survival instincts. He doesn't text back promptly? Immediate spiral and urge to block. He starts pulling away or creating distance. Panic rises, stories form. He chooses someone else or prioritizes differently. Self-worth takes a devastating hit. These are rapid reflexes, automatic responses that leave little room for pause, nuance, or deeper understanding. But what if, in those exact moments of intense trigger, you intentionally slowed down and chose a better, more empowering question? What if instead of seeking instant external answers or jumping to drastic actions, you turned inward with compassionate curiosity? Why does this specific situation feel so painfully familiar? What core belief about myself or relationships is being activated right now based on his actions, or lack thereof? You'd likely be astonished by the clarity and insights that emerge when you create that small gap. That's the transformative power of curiosity. It cracks open doors to genuine healing. That reaction alone keeps firmly locked. The reality is that we're rarely reacting solely to what's happening in the present moment. More often, we're responding to layered echoes of past experiences, the meanings we've unconsciously assigned to similar situations long ago. That's why seemingly small things can feel catastrophically large inside us. A delayed response might unconsciously echo old abandonment fears. Someone creating space might trigger confirmation of deep-seated beliefs that we're unlovable or burdensome. It's not just about the current interaction, it's about the heavy symbolic weight we've attached to it over time from previous wounds. Curiosity acts as a gentle interrupter, creating breathing room to challenge those automatic stories. Wait a minute, what if this reaction is less about his intentions and more about my lingering insecurities or past hurts? What if this moment is highlighting an old version of me that still believes my safety and worth depend on someone else's consistent presence or validation? The common mistake we make is assuming the only reliable way to protect ourselves is through controlling the external environment, blocking access, withdrawing dramatically, or trying to make our absence painfully felt. But that's often a subtle form of self-abandonment disguised as protection. It outsources your emotional stability and sense of safety to whether or not another person shows up in the ways you need. Let me be crystal clear. Real, sustainable power never comes from attempting to control or manipulate someone else's behavior, presence, or reactions. True power emerges from deep self-understanding, recognizing recurring patterns before they fully replay, and consistently choosing responses from a place of wholeness rather than lack. It's cultivated by asking yourself empowering questions like, how would I handle this situation differently if I already trusted deeply that I am enough exactly as I am? If I knew my safety wasn't dependent on his choices? If I didn't need external validation to feel secure? When you operate from that grounded space, everything shifts dramatically. You no longer feel compelled to block someone just to regain a sense of strength. You already embody strength naturally. You no longer chase artificial closure because you've cultivated profound inner clarity. You stop viewing relational challenges as things unfairly happening to you and start recognizing them as opportunities happening for your growth and evolution. Curiosity facilitates that pivotal role change, from feeling like a victim of circumstances or others' choices to becoming the conscious author and creator of your emotional life and relational experiences. It illuminates the unconscious beliefs you've been operating under. Things like, I'm only worthy when actively chosen, or love always fades or leaves eventually, or if someone creates distance, I must have done something wrong to deserve it. Once those beliefs are brought into the light of awareness, you gain the power to question their validity, challenge their hold, and gradually replace them with more empowering truths. That's precisely how genuine transformation unfolds, not through hastily deleting contacts or profiles, but through patiently rewriting the internal narratives that those people and situations triggered. So the next time disappointment, rejection, or a painful trigger arises, resist the immediate rush to cut off, withdraw, or spiral into self-doubt. Instead, take a grounding breath, invite curiosity in. Ask yourself the game-changing question: what is this experience revealing to me about my own beliefs, patterns, or areas ready for healing? That single, powerful question is where true liberation and unstoppable growth begin. The person who masters asking it becomes emotionally resilient beyond measure. There's a profound yet often overlooked distinction between mere silence and authentic stillness, and understanding it can completely revolutionize how you navigate emotional pain, boundaries, and personal power. Most people conflate the two without realizing they're worlds apart in depth and impact. Silence is relatively easy to achieve on the surface. You simply stop replying. You don't initiate contact. You block, unfollow, delete threads, and dramatically disappear from their radar. You go radio silent, hoping your absence sends a clear message or proves an important point about your worth. But stillness? That's an entirely different level of emotional sophistication and inner mastery. Stillness emerges when you cease reacting not out of avoidance, suppression, or strategy, but because you've become genuinely centered, grounded, and at peace within yourself. Stillness reflects peace that isn't performative or conditional. It's deeply real, embodied, and sustainable. I've witnessed this dynamic countless times in coaching and real-life stories. Someone experiences deep hurt, disrespect, being overlooked, or devalued, and their instinctive response is to retreat into heavy silence, cutting off all communication abruptly, slamming metaphorical doors. In the moment, it can absolutely feel like reclaimed strength, like you're finally taking a stand and regaining control.